Hi and welcome back to part 3 of our video series in MIS2. We are now at the topic of conditions. Conditions we can basically use to check if a certain condition is met, and if it's met, so if it's true, then we can execute certain group of code, lines of code, which we group together, and if it's not met, we don't form that group of lines of code. How do we do that? Well, we use the operators from before, which then in the result give us a true or false. So true means the condition is met, false means it isn't met, and we then can basically say if this condition is met, so if it's true, then do the following, else don't do the other things, or don't do it at all. That's our options. So it's basically like in Excel where you have then if this, then do that. The same is true here. That's the whole fundamentals of coding is basically if this, then that. So, and in Python, the if is an if, then the else is an else, and then we have, if we have more than one condition, so we have several states like if this, then do this, or if this, then do this, or if this, then do this. In all else cases, do that. Then we have else if in usual programming, but in Python that's an elif, and elif if you want. So it's just short for else if because we just spare two symbols and we are too lazy to code them. So let's dive into that. So let's do an example where we are in a warehouse. We have items on stock, and we have currently a certain amount of stocks on stock, and if we are below a certain threshold, we have to restock the items in our warehouse. If we're between a certain threshold, let's say 50 to 75, we're fine, and if we're above that threshold, we have too many things on stock, but basically we can lay back, lean back, and relax a bit. And we want to build that logic now into our code. So we learn if and else statements. So first we define a variable which currently holds our current amount of stocks. So a variable that contains the current stock quantity in our warehouse that now can be boxes of an item. It could be an item which we stored, which is an online store. It could be pallets of boxes. Whatever the unit of things is we want to look at here, but we just call it current stock. Use your imaginary to say what it is. And let's say we currently have 60, so we're perfectly fine in between the 50 to 75 threshold. And we now want to implement, we want to map 3 states using the following logic of if and else statements. So if current stock is below 50, if it's between 50 and 75, and the last one if above 75. Those are 3 conditions we want to map. So we basically want to say something like if below 50, do a bunch of code. If between 50 and 75, and if above 75. This is our logic, then do the following. So let's start with the first one. How is that if statement built? Basically, we want to analyze a variable, which is our current stock. So we can copy that and just paste it here. If the current stock falls below 50, then we should do a bunch of stuff, right? So how do we do that in Python? Well, the if statement is if. Then we use our comparison operator, what we want to analyze. If current stock is below 50, that's already done. Then we use a double point to say, then do the following after the double point. So if we now hit enter, you see that there's an indent. So we don't start from left writing, but with the indentation a bit to the right. Why? Because now we can write a bunch of code like, for example, A, B, C, D. Everything with that indent will then be executed only if this condition is met, if this is true. And everything which is then to the left again to the left, is outside of the if. So this is then executed as the next line of code. So if this is met, those lines of code are executed, and then we go to the next line, which is that. So even if this isn't met, this will be executed, and these lines are only executed if this is met, because they're part of the if statement. That's basically it. So part of that, if this is met, do this do in all cases afterwards, after you check that. So basically, whatever we want to do, if this is met, we now have to put with this indents. So it's executed as an if statement. And we basically want to, first of all, analyze how much stock is missing. Then we want to tell the user how much stock he has to reorder, so he knows, okay, everything's fine again, so I have enough on stock in my warehouse. So we want to have a variable, something like missing stock. And this is then whatever is missing. But how much does actually miss? We do know it's some number minus our current stock. Because we do know currently that's what we have on stock. That we don't have to order, but we have to order the missing part to a certain value. And we want to have the stock always between 50 and 75, by 50 being our lower threshold and 75 our upper threshold. So this is the most we want to have on stock. Then we want to wait until it falls below 50. Then we want to restock. So probably we should reorder until we have 75 on stock, wait until it's below 50, and reorder until we have 75 on stock. So we probably want to take 75 as the upper threshold, subtract whatever we have currently on stock, so we do know how much we want to reorder. But we want to tell the user how much we want to reorder, so we want to print some information to him. So stuff like, you are low on items. You have to order an additional X. That's what we have to tell him. Maybe we do a double point so it's clear that you have to reorder. But X, we want to have the actual missing stock here. And we already learned that I just cannot use an integer or floating point and add it to a string. So when we want to add that to that as another string part, we first have to convert it to a string as well by using the function string and put that then into the brackets, the missing stock. By clicking on that, it was suggested down here by the autocomplete. If there's the autocomplete suggestion, you can click on it and then it will fill out automatically. So now this should be printed, and the other two lines we don't need. And we then go to the next line of code, which would be that one. And that one should be the next if statement if it's between. All right. However, we do not make an if statement, then again an if statement. If there's several if statements in a row and we have to decide which one of those we choose, it's an if, an else if, an else if, an else if, and then the last part is the else part. So it should be an else if. However, else if is not the correct terminology Python uses. Python is for lazy people. We only write elif, short for else if. So else if the current stock is between those two values. How do we do that? So current stock is our variable, and that should be between 50. So on the one hand, it should be larger or equal than 50, because smaller than 50 we had already. So we need the equals part 50 and the larger part 50, and somehow. So I don't want to think about if it's an and or an or, but somehow it should be as well below 75. How do we check that it's the two things at the same time? It's either a logic and or, as we learned in operators. However, which one of those? Since both conditions have to be met at the same time. It's not enough if it's above 50, but we don't care if it's below. It has to be below 75 and it has to be above 50. So both sides needs to be true. And that's a logical AND in our situation. And if those conditions are both met, then we have to do something. And again, we probably want to inform the user about something. Like, for example, good, we have currently enough stock. Fine. From what I ask you in the description above here, that would be fine already, but we can now make smarter information. For example, okay, we do have enough stock, but how much do we have left, for example? And we can add that information as well, but we only have X, that's the amount we want to check, items in reserve. All right, how do we calculate X? First of all, it's again probably something we calculate. So we should put here a variable, which we change into a string, and then add another text here. So there the variable should be standing, such as here. We just add this string and this string for in between that one. All right. What do we want here? So it should be somehow above 50, but below 75. The number is always there. And it somehow has to do with current stock, because that is how much we have on stock. But current stock is how much we have left. And we want to know what's the difference to 50? How much more do we have on stock? So probably we have to subtract the 50 to that. That gives us a lower threshold until we have to restock. And that should be it. Because then we get information, okay, let's say we have 60, or we have 10 left, until you have to restock and reorder items. And then that's it, I guess. Then that's the third part. It's either now an else if we want to check a full condition. But if we're sure that it's the last condition, we can use an else as well. And we don't have to check anything, because that else just means in all other cases. And if there's only one case left, and we're sure, logically wise, that this is the only case left, else just gives us. That's it. That's what we do in all other cases. And we have to inform our user that everything's fine. Like, everything is fine. Just chill. You have enough on stock. And if we now execute it, we have 60. So we should be in that case. And we are good. We have currently enough stock, but we only have 10 items in reserve. And it works. All right. Now to your third exercise. Hit pause afterwards and try to complete it on your own. The solution will be in the next video. What do you have to do? It's basically an auto information system which tells you after I uploaded exam results how you performed. So we have a score as in most 1 hour exams. This is now artificial. It's not an official tool. 0 to 60 points for 60 minutes. And let's say I'm a really nice teacher and let you pass an exam if you pass or succeed 20 points. So if you're below 20 points, you didn't pass the exam. If you're above 20 points, you passed the exam. So the first condition we have to ask, if it's below 20, that wasn't good enough, try again next time. But if it's below between 20 and 30, you passed, but try harder next time. Not the best grade. Between 30 and 40, okay performance. Between 40 and 50, good, be proud of yourself, relax tonight, drink a beer, whatever. 50, excellent performance. If you're above 50, you're one of the best students in the class. Be happy and proud. And please try to build that logic here. Solution will be in the next video.